In this lesson, we're going to be transitioning to our next pie chart and animating the different pieces of the graph. Okay, so if we come over here to our main Corel infographic, just where we left off in our last lesson, you can see that right about here is where we're needing to transition to our next graph. So let's go ahead and transition this out and then prepare for our next graph. So I'm just going to hold Control and scrub to listen to the audio that we have here.
Most animals are pretty varied in their species too.
So right about here where the end of this marker, little section of markers is where we want that to transition off. So what I want to do is just do a simple expansion, a negative expansion of this mask. So let's come down here. We'll open this up. We already have some mask expansion keyframes here, so I'll just go ahead and set a keyframe with this where it's at. Then let's move forward about 10 frames, so I'll hold Shift and hit Page Down. And then we're going to negatively expand this until we can't see the dot anymore. Right about there. And then let's just clip this layer. I also don't want it to ease in to that last keyframe, so I'm just going to Control click that so that's a linear key. And let's hit Alt N bracket to just trim that layer to that spot. Now I also want the globe to disappear, or the countries that you can see here. So I'm going to have that happen just a little bit later so we can see the overlap with the white. So I think that looks kind of nice. So just right about here, let's go ahead and start that. That's going to be the map world. And this one, we'll do this with a scale because this one, it'll just be a little bit easier, I think, to do it that way. So go ahead and select that layer, hit the S key. We'll start a keyframe right there. Go forward 10 frames, hold Shift, Page Down, and then we'll just take that down to 0. And then we can trim this layer as well, just on the same keyframe, hit Alt N bracket. And then let's change this keyframe to an easy ease, just so it matches our masked teal layer. Okay, so just like that, I think that looks great. And we can go ahead and turn motion blur on for that whole mask, just so that when that starts to scale down, it'll get that nice amount of blur. Okay, so this is looking good. One other thing that I want to transition out is the 25%. So let's just transition that out at the same point as the world map comp is transitioning out. We already have some scale animation for that layer, so I'll just go ahead and add another keyframe here. We'll move forward to this key and just take that down to 0. And we can go ahead and trim this layer as well by hitting Alt and bracket. And let's not have this last key have any easy ease, so we'll Control click it. Just like that. That looks great. And now what I want to do is, as he starts saying this next bit of his talk, I want this to transition to the piece of the pie for the next graph, this blue color. So let's go over to that infographic split and look at that other pie chart. So it's this one right here. Let's go ahead and grab our selection tool and let's just draw a box around the pieces that we'll need. Now I don't want the text, and I also don't want this up here, so we just want these pieces. Let's go ahead and copy these. So we'll hit Control C to copy, go back to our main Corel infographic, and we'll just paste them right here. Now, I'm not too worried about using this because we're going to use similar techniques as far as the generate circle and the radial wipe to make these pieces. So we'll just look at this for reference. So let's scrub forward here, and this first value, if I just zoom in, is 1%. So that means that this needs to be set to a value that looks like 1%. So let's go ahead and select this layer. We'll just hit the U key to bring up its properties. And we only have radial wipe keyframes. So right now it's starting at 75. So let's go ahead and set a keyframe there. Let's move forward 10 frames. And we need to take this back up so that it's just this very small piece of the pie. And 99% is perfect because that's basically the same as 1% since we have this kind of reversed. And I think it'd be nice for this second key here to have some super ease on it. So just select that key. We'll go into our graph editor and just pull that handle backwards. So if we scrub through, you can see how that just gets slower there at the end. That looks nice. Okay, so let's scrub with Control to listen to our audio and see when we need to introduce our next part.
Those animals are pretty varied in their species too. Whales make up species too.
So it seems like with his sentence saying those animals are pretty varied in their species, we could kind of animate this a little bit better with our timing to maybe actually start a little bit later. So let's go ahead and just pull these keyframes forward so that happens later on, and then maybe stagger these a bit as well. So let's pull that forward for our 25% and come down here, pull this up a little bit, and this as well. Just hit the U key to bring that up. Okay, so let's see what this looks like now. Still a little bit late, so maybe we can even pull these forward some more. So we'll just be looking at this graph for a little bit longer, which is fine. And that'll actually give us a little more time to just see that globe animation really take it in. Just scrubbing to look at the timing. Now let's listen.
Are pretty varied in their species too. Whales make up 1%.
Okay, that's pretty good. I think maybe this starts going off a little bit early, so we can pull that forward a bit more.
Pretty varied in their species too. Whales make up 1%.
So whenever he's actually saying 1%, I think it'd be nice to use this piece from our graph to illustrate that. So let's just select those layers. Just come up here where we see the 1%, and that's just going to be that piece of the pie, so we can turn that off. Let's come up here. There we go. 1%, and then we also want to have its line, so the line for 1%. So I'll select both of those. We can just bring them up. And let's put this on the other side. So I'm just selecting that from my timeline, holding Shift and hitting the right arrow key to bring that up. And we probably need to increase these in scale. So let's go ahead and just turn on our continuously rasterized switch, hit the S key, and scale those up, just like that. And this is giving me a little bit of trouble just with my selection, so I'm going to go ahead and lock that layer. And let's zoom in a bit. We'll just kind of reposition that, just like that. And maybe move both of those up just so that it's at the top of that line, just to make it a little bit better aligned. Okay, so let's scrub and listen to this.
Whales make up 1%. Whales make up 1%.
So right when he starts to say 1%, let's have this line start to draw out. And I'd like it to draw out from the pie graph slice. So we can do that using our scale transformation. And we'll just move this anchor point so that it begins from over here. So grab your pan behind anchor point tool. We'll pull that over here. And let's come back up here to where that line begins. And let's just trim it so it begins actually where we're going to start setting our keyframe. So I'll hit Alt, open bracket. We know this is the scale we want, so I'll just go ahead and set a key there, pull that forward, and then we'll take this down to 0. Just like that. And if you want to, you could only scale it in that horizontal. So you could just break that right there, come back to the beginning, and let's see here. If we pull this over, this is going to be the value we want to change. So that means that on that first keyframe, this value still needs to be 285. So we'll move back to the first key and type in 285 here. So it's still going to have the proper height, but you won't see it since we trimmed the layer. You won't see it too soon. So that looks just a little bit better than having that super skinny line. Okay, let's just scrub a little further. And I think it'd be nice for this one as well, just to have a super ease at the end. So let's listen to it.
Make up 1%. Make up 1%.
So right about here is where that needs to be extended when he says 1%. So I'll just pull that back. And then we'll select both of these, give it an easy ease. And then the second one, we'll add the super ease with our graph editor. So select it, hit the graph editor, and just pull that handle straight backwards. Nice. So then that's just really slowly easing in. And then right about here, just before it begins, let's go ahead and have our 1% pop up. And I'd like it to pop up where it almost looks like it's coming out from this line. So let's move the anchor point, if you still have that tool selected, just right there. And that's going to be this 1% layer right here. So we'll go ahead and hit a scale keyframe, pull that forward, and then take that down to 0. And this one we'll leave constrained. And this one, I don't want it to have super ease, but we'll go ahead and just give it an easy ease, just like that. And let's see what that looks like. And we can scrub it with Control for audio.
Whales to make up 1%. Birds are 2%. Whales make up 1%.
So right when he finishes saying percent, I already want to be able to see the 1%. So let's just pull both of these layers back to this keyframe right here. And let's go ahead, deselect, and we'll trim this layer so it doesn't begin until this keyframe. So select it, hit Alt, open bracket, just like that. Let's watch a quick RAM preview just to see what we've created so far. Just kind of starting from where that's going to transition in and then out. So just hit the 0 key on my number pad to start that up. I'm going to pause it so you don't have to watch that RAM preview through.
Birds are 2%. Fish are 25% of all marine life on the planet. Those animals are pretty varied in their species too. Whales make up 1%. Birds are 2%.
Okay, so that looks pretty good. The only thing that I want to double check is that this actually is lining up with the top, because it looked like it was maybe a little bit off when we're zoomed back here. But I think at 100% that looks fine. So we'll go ahead and leave that as it is. The only thing I'd like to change is to have that 25% where this pie piece starts to move backwards. I'd just like that to start a little bit sooner. So maybe right about here. Let's come back and we'll just unlock that layer and pull this keyframe back. So it's just going to start a little bit sooner and go more slowly, just like that.
Whales make up 1%.
Just like that. I think that looks a lot better. Okay, so what we're going to do is finish this lesson up here, and then I'm going to come back in the next lesson and we'll start animating these other pieces of our chart. And I'll just show you kind of how to line them up so that they actually begin where this layer left off. And we'll just finish up this pie chart animation.